Hello everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday. I'm going to be uploading this video today because I'm not going to be available on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. So I thought I would do all the videos ahead of time, and I know now ahead of time when and when or not I will be available, and I'll try to make that sort of part of the future. It's sometimes difficult though because sometimes things come up when I least expect it, so yeah, that's really though all I can do for now, but I'll try to have them all uploaded today so that you may enjoy them and you don't have to sit and wait. So without further ado, for this Animation Friday, let me discuss live action within animation. This concept of mixing live action and animation together is actually not a new-ish concept. Even back in the 1920s, Walt Disney chose to use live action with animation. They were called the Alice comedies, where he had a little girl within this animated fictional world. And that's something that is, I think, largely, at least the concept itself has been, I think, largely overlooked by animation over the years because it hasn't been done. It's been done before. It's just it hasn't been done all that often. I mean, I'm surprised it hasn't been done all that often. But again, that might be due to that it's just a lot more complicated. You know, mixing animation with live action often leads to, you know, a very kind of confusing and yet kind of goofy premise. Who Framed Roger Rabbit's perfect example, Space Jam, you know, all those kinds of films. You know, and even then, the only one that was really genuinely successful as far as a film that did this was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, really. A lot of the other attempts were sort of flopped, especially the ones that tried to insert the Looney Tunes cartoons. And although you could say Enchanted technically attempted to make live action and animation, they weren't really inserted together in the same way that a movie like Space Jam or a movie like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's just an interesting style and approach, and I think it's just a lot more difficult to do. So I don't think it really has been done as often over the years. And it seems like a lot of the ones that did at least try didn't really succeed all too well. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, though, being really the exception. Now, I think the huge appeal for it, especially for kids, is that you're being sort of part of the real world, your real world, but there are these characters or there is this surrounding that's it's animated. And I think that's really where a huge appeal comes from this, because it's blending in reality with fantasy. And we've seen it though too within little portions, like for example, Mary Poppins. You know, there's one point where the children are within an animated world with Mary Poppins and also Bert too. So again, I think there is a genuine appeal for it. The reason, though, I think it hasn't been done as often is usually I think there's often an imbalance that ends up coming in that um, results in maybe it just being a little bit too out there. Only because, again, you're putting these two completely different worlds together, and when you're doing that, it's very hard to make one that actually works. um, but again, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, though, is a perfect example of how to execute a live action film that has animation inserted in it, or have animation be in the background, and then the live action characters be in the foreground. That film was really the only one to encapsulate the concept, I think, so well. And all of the other times, even with the short little Disney cartoons that existed within the 20s, the Alice comedies, even those had some cute moments, but at the same time, it's not a very, it's just not so common. You just don't see a film that does it all that often. And even then, I don't think you really even see animation actually, in particular 3D animation being used within a live action setting or having live action characters in a 3D setting. Is that maybe going to change? Maybe, but I think it personally would look a little too goofy, or just a little bizarre, because it would be like basically entering a video game, so to speak, because that's usually what a lot of 3D computer films look like nowadays. Not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just they look like computers, like video games do. And I think, though, with 2D you could get away a lot more with the comedy and just being kind of over the wall and just goofy. Whereas I feel with 3D, it just doesn't have that same, structure to it that would allow for a lot of over the wall scenarios to occur. And sometimes people even say computer generation looks a lot more realistic than 2D. So, if you're putting it into a 3D setting, it's not like you're changing, I guess, all that much either. So it's one of those things where I don't think this kind of technology in particular was really focused on or really used all that often, for some odd reason. And I think, though, partially, again, like I said before, people either like a specific identity of a film, um, or they want a certain setting. They don't want to, I think, be confused. And I think oftentimes when you put two worlds together, it sometimes the audiences really know what to focus on. And I think that's probably another issue as far as putting live action with animation together. And again, I think there just wasn't a lot of focus on it or trying to generate any good material out of it, because again, the only real success that really came out of this concept, excluding the earlier cartoons that did do this kind of a technique, was, again, like I've said before, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So it is an interesting topic. I mean, I think it would be nice to see this utilized more, but I don't think it is, because since we've basically converted everything pretty much into 3D now, and also the fact that even though television, there is still a large popularity to 2D animation. There's not a whole lot of resources that I think can be utilized to ultimately allow live action and animation to be together as one. I think it's interesting because really the way Who Framed Roger Rabbit was filmed, I mean, it really showcased the potential, but I don't think that potential was really ultimately realized, unfortunately. And I think that's because largely in part due to the renaissance of Disney films, where they were going back to their more traditional roots. So I think that's why this kind of concept didn't really get off the ground all that much, and it became sort of more of the alternative scene by, you know, having films like Space Jam and you know, the Looney Tunes be part of live action. You know, it's just one of those concepts that kind of just got underappreciated. I mean, it would be nice to see more films like it, but I doubt that's going to be possible, especially considering the fact that there was this computerized revolution, and there was this lack of a market really for 2D, at least for now. So yeah, I don't think it's really going to take off or really surface at all. But it's always nice to see what at least the films that did try to do it did with it. But yeah, I think that's really, though, ultimately all I can say about this topic. Love to hear what your thoughts are, but I think that's really ultimately all I can say. It's definitely something that's not looked into all that often, and if you haven't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I actually did a review of that film. And yeah, I think if you want to kind of see a film that does this kind of a technique, definitely check that film out, because it's really the only one that did it so successfully. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.